Hi there. Welcome to this free training on how to use project-based learning to reduce burnout and boost student ownership, which I would assume that this is something that a lot of us are feeling right now, especially if you're in this training. I know for me that come November, I tend to feel really ready for a break, so hopefully you have one coming up. We have one right now. We are literally in the middle of it, and it was pretty badly needed. So I hope that this webinar can give you some value, some inspiration moving forward into the next part of the school year or your home learning year, whatever role you play in education. And with that in mind, I would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat, which is this discussion button in the right top corner of your screen. You should see a little discussion button. You can click on that, and I would love to know where you're watching from in the world and what your role is in education. Are you a teacher? Are you a homeschool parent? Maybe a principal or a counselor? I would love to learn about you and what brings you here today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Pull up my presentation. Okay. Tired of teaching the hard way? How to use project-based learning to reduce burnout and boost student ownership. I am Sarah Seegar, and here we go. In this webinar, I will walk you through 10 essential pieces that make project-based learning sustainable for you and meaningful for your students. These practical, beginner-friendly strategies are what make PBL actually work, so you're not stuck doing all the planning, managing, and motivating yourself. You'll leave with the tools to prevent common frustrations like student apathy, behavior issues, low-quality work, and your burnout before they even start. All right, so I encourage you to stay with me until the end of this training because there will be a bonus related to just kind of the digital world and being a 21st century learner, and it's just a little extra support for you as you move into your project-based learning journey. I encourage you to turn off all distractions, so put your phone away or put it on silent. If you can, put yourself in a space where you can really focus, get a pad of paper. There is a workbook that goes along with this. So first, before getting into the training, I really want to kind of get to what you're doing here, what your path is, where you're at with project-based learning. So 1, you're curious, 2, you're hopeful, or 3, you're totally burned out. I would like you to, and there's a little discussion tab up at the top, I would like you to write if you're a 1, a 2, or a 3. So if you're a 1, you're curious. You've heard of PBL and want to try it, but need help getting started the right way. Or 2, you're hopeful. You've dabbled in PBL, but you're looking for structure that makes it more sustainable. You like what you've experienced, but you could use a little more guidance. Or 3, you're totally burned out. Maybe you haven't done project-based learning at all. You don't know much about it. You're hopeful, so you're curious and hopeful that project-based learning can kind of get at this burnout you're feeling because your students need so much from you. So add that to the discussion. Whatever the reason you're here, I fully support you through it. Before getting any further into this training, I really would like you to know where my information, where my expertise comes from, how I got to this place of teaching about project-based learning. I started off not in education. I was an experiential scientist. I worked in the field. I got my degree in ecology and conservation. But then when I was out in the field, I really just realized in that experience that a lot of what I was learning was from experience. And so I really just started going down this track of, I really want to share what I know. And that what I decided at the time was going to be through teaching. And so I went back to Minnesota and I started the 9th through 12th grade teaching licensure program. And my very first job was in a project-based high school. And so I worked there for 11 years, and this experience was entirely project-based learning. I've mentioned that I'm a project-based parent, that I do project-based learning with my own children at home. If you've ever been to my Instagram page, you see that unfolding all the time. And now I currently work at a Montessori school. I spent over a decade in a student-led project-based school. I've served hundreds of students. I've designed and implemented and facilitated hundreds of PBLs. I've worked with a variety of age groups and skill levels. I have 17 years of project-based curriculum development between being a project-based educator and now the work that I do through Experiential Learning Depot. I've written 160 blog posts. And then I just have a lifelong love of learning. Such a big part of me just wants to share my experiences with project-based learning. Student-led project-based learning is one of the most powerful ways to bring purpose, engagement, and energy back into the classroom for you and your students. It's not just possible, it's completely practical. And with a few puzzle pieces in place, it can completely transform the way you teach and the way students learn. Okay, let's talk about just the main points we're going to hit in this training. We're going to start with a teacher's role exercise, what your role could be in project-based learning, in self-directed project-based learning specifically. And this exercise will give you something tangible to bring with you beyond this training. I'm going to talk about what PBL is and why it's so important, why it's so beneficial. And then I'm going to talk about these 8 puzzle pieces that you can have in place when you start or when you do student-led project-based learning so that it does act, it does move you along this path of reducing burnout and improving student ownership. I'm also going to talk about how you can work with me beyond this training, and then I will go over some frequently asked questions. So first, we're going to do this exercise where you're going to design your student's role in learning. If students were truly leading the learning, they would be. So I want you to just fill in these blanks. If students were truly leading the learning, for example, they would be interviewing experts, managing their own timelines, making discoveries for themselves instead of you lecturing. So I want you to just write down 3 ideas or 3 things that students would be doing if they were truly leading the learning. Next, I want you to write down 3 things that you would no longer be doing if you were guiding instead of managing everything. For example, you wouldn't be the entertainment anymore. You wouldn't be designing lesson plans with the hope of keeping students engaged, of making it fun, of giving them rewards. You wouldn't be reteaching when somebody misses something. So some of the tasks and stressors that lighten with student-led PBL are this laundry list of things. For example, delivering daily lectures. You wouldn't have to lecture anymore. Creating step-by-step lesson plans because the PBL design is the lesson. That is the experience. You wouldn't be the source of all content anymore. You wouldn't be delivering all of the information for students that half the time aren't listening or aren't engaged or have other things on their mind. You wouldn't be answering the same questions over and over or chasing student engagement and motivation, making sure that it's fun, making sure that they care. You wouldn't be driving all classroom progress and momentum or feeling responsible for every single outcome because your students will have more ownership and autonomy and agency. You won't be entertaining students just to keep them focused or reteaching content that didn't stick or that they weren't there for, or micromanaging every group and project detail or cleaning up the messes, literally and figuratively. So let's start with what is student-led learning, what is project-based learning, and what do you get when you combine those things together? So starting with what is student-led PBL? It's authentic, inquiry-based projects that are designed and led by students. So one of those components that makes project-based learning unique from a project is sustained inquiry. So students do the digging, they do the research, they do the exploration. They might experiment, they might interview, they might talk to community experts and use community resources and go on field trips. And so it's this bigger thing than just hopping on the internet and, researching a topic. Students use community experts, so they tap into the community. They might work with business owners. They might work with policymakers. They might work with their neighbors, residents, anybody who is pertinent or relevant to the problem at hand or the topic that is being explored. Students have authentic experiences. So rather than just, hopping on the internet and researching on various websites, they might go somewhere and shadow someone or volunteer or have a speaker come into the classroom or, again, experiment or have a simulation. These are authentic learning experiences that really heighten the learning experience. They produce innovative final products, ideally a final product that solves a problem or that is relevant or that the audience can utilize in some way. It's not just something that's created like a poster board and then thrown away in the end. It is shared with an authentic audience through an authentic presentation. So that authentic audience is an audience that can benefit from the new skills, the knowledge, or the solution or the final product itself. And then all of that is kind of compiled into a driving question that does exactly that. It drives the experience. And then the student-led piece of it includes choice and voice. So your students might choose the community expert that they use. They might decide on the final product. They might have input as it relates to who they share their final product with. And just generally their self-direction and autonomy. So you're not managing their timeline. You're not managing their deadlines. You're not managing their task list. They are responsible for those pieces. So the tasks and the stressors that lighten with student-led PBL, you can, again, I'm not going to walk through all of these because I already have, but you can see how student-led project-based learning, this voice and choice, this inquiry, this exploration, this autonomy, this agency, these pieces or these components or elements of project-based learning, especially when self-directed, lighten your load in all of these ways. When your students, for example, are designing their own PBLs, this lightens your load of having to go home at night when you should be, having dinner with your partner or taking your child to dance classes or whatever, that you're not planning a lesson instead of doing those things. Or chasing student engagement and motivation with project-based learning when students have input, when they have agency, when they have decision-making power. They are intrinsically more motivated. So why PBL works for you and your students? PBL is student-centered, inquiry-based, real-world, and skills-driven. You shift from being the director to the facilitator or the mentor or the guide. Students gain agency, curiosity, problem-solving, collaboration skills, communication skills, and so many more that I just didn't have room on this page to list. And they care more, so you manage less. This only works if PBL is implemented with the right supports in place, and that's what this training is all about. These supports are these 8 pieces that really make project-based learning smooth and effective and interesting and engaging for all of your learners. So let's get into those 8 puzzle pieces. The puzzle pieces that make PBL work for you instead of against you. They lighten the load in those ways that we talked about. So puzzle piece number 1 is having routines and systems. Seems pretty basic, yes. However, I did not have these systems in place when I was doing project-based learning at the beginning of my PBL career, and it was complete chaos. So I learned from project-based learning, 10 years of that with high school students, that some systems really changed the game. So planning and task management tools, calendars, self-direction tools, portfolios that students can use to put their progress and their documents into, spreadsheets, bulletin boards. These are all systems that have really made the experience work so much more seamlessly. Routines are also such an important puzzle piece. So things like having a general schedule that your students know is coming, having daily check-ins. Maybe your students walk in and that's the first thing they do. And they actually do it because it's routine, because you've made that the expectation. Progress circles. I have every Wednesday, we would compile all of our progress, or students would share their PBLs and where they are in the process and gather feedback. My students know that that's every Wednesday so that they're prepared for it. Weekly presentations, again, those are on Fridays. So every Friday, my students do presentations of either completed PBLs or PBLs that they have in progress. Regardless of what we do on those days, whether it's a weekly presentation, a daily check-in, a progress circle, those are my things. You might have your own things, but make sure that some of these routines are in place, because if your students don't know what's coming, chaos can kind of unfold rather quickly. And I know that from experience. When systems and routines are in place, students know what to do and when to do it without you reminding them or teaching them constantly. So I don't know about you, but one of my biggest sources of burnout is when students say my name 10,000 times a day because they don't know what to do. They don't know what's going on. They don't know the next step. When you have systems and routines in place that specifically are more self-directed, this kind of irons that problem out because your students know what to do and when to do it. So in the discussion tab, I want you to rate yourself from 1 to 5 on how well you do with systems and routines. The next puzzle piece to have in place to make sure project-based learning is working for you instead of against you is having scaffolding tools for your students. So things like, if you're going to have your students design their own PBLs, that they have a PBL workbook so that they're not constantly coming to you and saying, well, I don't know in what step to do this. I don't know how to design a PBL. I don't know. Spreadsheets, brainstorming exercises, inquiry prompts, task lists, checklists, processes, digital tools like planners and calendars and portfolios, reflection prompts, even rubrics. I make sure my students have rubrics so that they know exactly how they're going to be evaluated. This really reduces the amount of questions, the amount of me managing their own time, the amount of managing their own tasks, and so on and so on and so on. So these things my students have access to all the time. And at some point in our project-based learning journey, they know exactly how to use these things and when to use them, partly because of the systems and routines that we also have in place. So why have scaffolding tools? In what way does this reduce your burnout and put more ownership on your students? Students, especially beginners to project-based learning and student-led learning, will benefit from support to stay independent. So if you just throw them to the wolves and say, well, design your own PBL, and I don't mean to sound condescending or facetious, because this is what I used to do. When I was a first-year project-based learning teacher, I just was like, okay, this is what project-based learning is. It's so amazing, isn't it? Get started, design your own. And they really would falter quite quickly because, one, they don't know how to do project-based learning yet. And two, they're learners. They're still young. And so they're trying to figure out all of these steps that you're asking them to do. They're trying to design a solution to a problem, and so on and so on. So there's going to be the need for guidance. That is your role. And these tools, these guiding tools, are part of how you provide that guidance. So here are some examples of some of those tools that I have available to my students. One is how to write a driving question. Your students are likely not going to have any idea how to do that, how to write a PBL driving question, especially beginners. The next one in is mapping community resource use, a PBL checklist. So have they included these things in their PBL? A community expert, a final product, an authentic presentation. PBL goals. So this is, if you happened to design their PBL for them or they designed their own PBL, they still have PBL goals to write and plans to accomplish those goals. So these are just some of the examples of some of the guiding scaffolding tools that my students use that takes a huge weight off of me because my students are responsible for these things. So what's one kind of support material your students would benefit from during a PBL? All right, puzzle piece number 3, feedback and reflection. Again, this is not something I've always had in place. So what am I talking about here? Reflection. You could have students reflect on their learning experiences, like an experiment, field trips, any speakers that came to your classroom or your home. Daily, they could do a reflection at the end of the week at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of a quarter. They can write reflections after group work or a community expert experience, or after they've wrapped up a project-based learning experience. They can reflect on feedback that they've been given on a PBL and their progress. So there are a variety of places to insert reflection, and I think that is incredibly important. And I'm saying that as an experiential educator, where reflection really matters because it's such an important piece of growth. Being able to look back and make changes or make plans moving forward. There are also a variety of ways you can have students reflect. You can have them answer prompts that you've given them. You can have them write an essay reflecting after a PBL experience. You can have them orally reflect with you or with one of their peers. And I highly recommend making reflection part of your routine. And then feedback. What does that mean and why is it important? I give my students feedback, or community experts give them feedback, or their parents or their peers. We do a variety of different types of feedback from different groups of people. Students can receive feedback on their PBL designs, their progress after group work, and how they managed group work. They can receive feedback on interview questions that they've written for a community expert before they actually do that interview. They can get feedback on a presentation, on questions that they've written to try to answer their driving question. And again, it can be teachers, peers, community members, etc. They can take feedback from anybody, but again, make it a structured routine. So I talked earlier about how one of our routines is having project circles, where students on Wednesdays meet at our large table and they go from student to student or group to group and share their progress for their PBLs. And students have an opportunity to give each other feedback in that moment. So why is feedback and reflection so important, especially as it relates to reducing your own burnout and putting the ownership on your students? When feedback and reflection are structured and expected, it becomes second nature for them to reflect, to grow, to plan. And that starts being more on them than it is on you. They really start to take the reins and lead these experiences independently. What's one word that describes how feedback currently feels in your classroom or homeschool? I would love for you to add that to discussion. So if you're one of these people that is answering this question with feedback is really hard for me, I don't like giving it because it feels like your students are really just getting defensive, I would encourage you to just keep at it, keep on trying, because it will eventually just become second nature and expected. And so that kind of leads me into this fourth puzzle piece of PBL culture building. So what I mean by that, building and maintaining a solid PBL culture from day one. So there's going to be a very specific kind of culture in a PBL classroom. The PBL culture, or the culture of any classroom, is the norms, the values, the priorities, the beliefs. And so in a PBL culture, in a PBL classroom or a PBL homeschool, one of the norms or beliefs or values or priorities is inquiry or gathering feedback or producing something that serves a purpose or solves a problem. These are all parts of being in a PBL classroom. It's part of the PBL culture, which would be different than a more traditional classroom culture that maybe values listening or reproducing or following instructions, that kind of thing. So how do you build that PBL culture from day one? A huge part of my PBL culture building strategy is relationship building. I try to understand my students, know what they need, know what their challenges are, know what their strengths are, and then we build PBLs around those things. So again, it's very personalized. And part of that is building relationships between me and them, but also with each other, building relationships with their peers, because a big part of PBL is really taking sort of an academic risk where you're asking students to own the learning, and that can be pretty scary, or to have these ideas that are outside of the box, and that can feel really scary. especially for young people who are feeling judged every day by their peers and by society. So building relationships, building a community that is trusting and safe and exploratory and adventurous, where students feel comfortable asking questions and trying new things and making mistakes. And then skill building is a big part of my PBL culture because PBL requires things like communication and collaboration and problem solving and critical thinking. Another way that I build a solid PBL culture from day one and continue to maintain it is have my students develop classroom norms. And what I mean by that is these things that are sort of expected, like getting feedback. In this PBL classroom, you will get feedback. You will revise based on that feedback, and you will try again. So these norms are kind of like these expectations that you and your students sort of develop together that leads them to say, oh, well, this is just what we do here. And so why or how does building a solid PBL culture work for you instead of against you? How does it reduce burnout? How does it make your students more independent and self-directed and take more ownership of their learning? Because project-based learning won't be an effective or positive experience without trust, safety, and shared expectations. And that shared expectations part, in my own experience, is huge. What's one belief, expectation, or norm you'd want all students to share in a PBL classroom or homeschool? I would love for you to put that in the discussion. Puzzle piece number 5 is skill building. Specifically, the puzzle piece is providing explicit instructions and exercises in certain PBL skills. So skills that are involved in PBL, like 21st century skills and executive functioning skills. Project-based learning, for example, is a large undertaking. There's all of these components that you've seen. So one of those components is utilizing community experts. So if you just think of all of the tasks involved in working with a community expert, from identifying a community expert that would work well for this particular PBL, to finding their contact information, to reaching out to them, to crafting an email, to sending it, to waiting for a response, to organizing a time that works to meet, to figuring out what the best mode of communication is, such as FaceTime or a phone call or continued through email or in person. This is a long laundry list of tasks just involved in one component of the project-based learning experience. That requires students being able to manage their tasks, being able to manage their time, being able to sequence tasks in an effective and logical manner. So these are examples of skills that are important in PBL. And I will say, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, my students can't do any of that stuff. They really struggle with all of it. They're not going to have these skills right off the bat. I just want to say that from the start. There is going to be some work on your end, especially for beginner project-based learners that may struggle with some of these skills. And you can help them build those skills. Skills like communication, collaboration, resourcefulness, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, and so on. Some of the things that we've already talked about. And I like to do that through daily exercises, group challenges, and skills journals. So daily exercises might be they walk into the room and on the board is a prompt. If what skill I want them to build is identifying community experts that are relevant to their topic or their problem, the prompt might be something like, if you were going to write a news article, that's what your final product is, in theory, just pretend. Write a list of all of the members of your community that could help you with that in some way, either through expertise or resources that they could provide, or training, or a learning space. And so I would just have them take 10 minutes to do this hypothetical exercise. I also like group challenges, where students work together on a challenge to build some of these skills, like problem solving or critical thinking. And then I also have them do a 21st century skills journal, where at the beginning of their time with me, they decide on some specific 21st century skills that they're not feeling confident about. They plan experiences to help them build those skills, and then they journal about those experiences in this journal. And then they can look back at it at the end of the year, at the end of the session, at the end of the week, however it's organized, so that they can see growth in these skills. I've found that to be incredibly effective. And providing explicit instructions and exercises in PBL related to executive functioning skills like flexible thinking, time management, planning, organization, and so on. And again, I do this with daily exercises, reflection, systems and tools that I have in place like task management tools or spreadsheets. And then PBL training is a really big one. I like to spend a pretty big chunk of time at the beginning of our PBL journey with my students, training them in project-based learning. So why is this skill building so very important to help you keep your sanity and your students take on their own learning? Because intentional skill building gives students the tools they need to succeed in a self-directed environment and helps you avoid constant hand holding and overwhelm. So yes, if your students really struggle with task management, helping them build that skill is going to take a lot of the weight off of your shoulders. So in the discussion, I would love for you to add one 21st century skill you want your students to practice more often. Critical thinking. Is it problem solving? Is it creativity? Self-direction? Adaptability? These are all examples of skills that we build in our lives and really need to have in adulthood, and project-based learning really helps them build these skills, especially when skill building is done with intention on your part. Puzzle piece number 6 is normalizing mistakes. Celebrate and encourage mistakes and revisions. This kind of comes back to the feedback puzzle piece a little bit and the reflection puzzle piece in that, and even the PBL culture building piece, making mistakes, getting feedback, making revisions, and trying again. These are all such an important fixture of a PBL culture. And unless a student has been a part of that PBL culture, they may really struggle with this piece. Because oftentimes what making mistakes means to a young person is having to do more work to fix it. I would encourage you to build this mindset of mistakes are what we do here. They are expected. They are celebrated because that's where learning happens. So how? How do we celebrate and encourage mistakes and revisions? How do we get students to be okay with, not only okay with, but expect to try again and again and again? One of those ways is to change your mindset and your language. Use creative strategies like design thinking. So design thinking is a process by which students design a solution, test it, fail, test it again, fail, revise it, try again, and so on. So having strategies or learning experiences or processes that sort of make failure a part of that process. And then publicly model setbacks and try agains. So I mess up constantly, and that's where learning happens. And then build revision into the process. Again, with something like project-based learning, having those feedback sessions, reflection and feedback, that is a way of building revision into the process. My students are expected to get feedback on their work, revise it, and try again. There's multiple drafts in every PBL. So why? How does celebrating mistakes and incorporating revision into the process make your life easier and put more of the onus on your students? It does this because the process matters more than the product, and students learn resilience when revision is normalized. They will stop resisting. They will stop complaining. They will stop work avoidance. If they know that mistakes are expected, it's a norm in this PBL culture, revisions are required. So in the chat, what's one word your students associate with failure? And what is one word you want them to associate with it? So for example, one word my students might associate with failure is extra work. That means you have to do it again. It means you have to start over. What I want them to associate with it, with failure, is opportunity. It's an opportunity to make an impact, to try again, to learn something new. Another puzzle piece is student portfolios, and this is one of my very favorite puzzle pieces. A portfolio is a place to house all things project-based. So things like their ideas, their PBL designs, any task lists, their calendars, drafts, so feedback and revisions and reflections, final products, their evaluations, maybe an interview that they had with a community expert, or a photograph of their authentic presentation. Everything they do goes in this binder or in this digital portfolio. So again, it could be digital or it could be physical binders. My students use Google Slides to put all of their stuff, and I find digital to be more beneficial to my students because a lot of what they have is media based. So, placing photos in there or videos or graphic designs or charts, that kind of stuff, that all goes in there. So if they can, they can't put a video in a physical binder, for example. But do what works for you and your students. So this is an example of what my PBL portfolio looks like. These are just 3 of the slides as examples of what they might put in there. So they might put photos of time spent with their community expert and then a reflection on it and how they used that community expert in their PBL, or writing PBL goals, standards, skills. And then, the great thing about a portfolio is that it showcases growth. So they can look back over these drafts, these revisions, these reflections, and the impact that their PBLs made. So it's a memory bank of their learning that showcases growth over time, and it's entirely self-managed. So I'm not creating this for them and then showing them that at the end. And these portfolios are great to be used in student-led conferences as well. So in the chat, what's one item you'd love to see included in your students' learning portfolio? And then finally, puzzle piece number 8 is to stay true to PBL. What do I mean by that? Don't skip the components that make PBL what it is. So especially for beginners who are very uncomfortable with project-based learning because it's not how they've been learning the bulk of their academic career, they might try to skip certain things. Like I've had students ask me often, can I skip the authentic presentation? Can I just present it to the class? Can I just present it to you? Do I have to put it on display? Do I have to give it to somebody relevant? Do I have to use a community expert? Can I just find an interview on YouTube? I would highly recommend that you don't budge on that. Because what happens then is eventually it gets to a point where, okay, well, she said I didn't have to do authentic presentations. And then it's going to be that way forever, right? You're setting a precedent. So things like these components that we talked about, sustained inquiry, community experts and partnerships, innovative final products, authentic presentations, real world impact. If you don't include these things, then it's just a project. And if it's just a project, you're not getting the impact. You're not getting the skills built that really make project-based learning so powerful and amazing. So why is it so important as it relates to your burnout and your students' ownership? Because if students don't feel the impact, they disengage and the work comes back to you. So again, if it's just this, it's a project, it becomes a project instead of project-based learning, then they're not engaged anymore. It's not fun anymore. It feels more like a chore because they aren't invested. They're not serving. They're not providing a solution to a problem. So the investment is gone. They don't care about it. And then you're back at square one. So for example, like I said, I was a life science teacher. So I did seminars where my students would do project-based learning experiences related to whatever the topic was that we were talking about or the problem. So for example, I had my students choose an endangered species to design a project-based learning experience around. A project would be to choose, the topic is an endangered species, let's say a sea turtle. They research with books and online sources, they copy and paste a poster board, and they present to the class. There's no impact, there's no problem solved, there's no one public is seeing it, so it doesn't have to be good. They don't have to care about it. It's not making an impact, right? So there's no investment. There's no need to do a good job. There's no need to care about this. Versus a project-based learning experience. So PBL is problem-based. A student chooses sea turtles as their endangered species. They've identified a problem being that tourism has an especially large impact on endangered sea turtles. And so she dives in with sustained inquiry. Online resources, sure. Books, sure. But she also speaks to a marine biologist in Florida. She goes on field trips to the aquarium. She has speakers come to the school. She does interviews, etc., etc. So it's not just, finding a website and copying down information. She's really getting in there, gathering different perspectives, talking to different people, using different resources to really understand the issue. She partners with community experts. So she might partner with scientists or policymakers, marketing specialists, tribal nations, NGOs, the list goes on. In this case, her partners were actually hotel staff and managers, and you'll see why in a second. The innovative final product that solves a problem that she decided to go with was to create an awareness and action brochure specifically directed at tourists that frequent nesting beaches for sea turtles. So she created this brochure that gives tourists tips on how to be a responsible tourist near nesting sites for sea turtles. The authentic presentation piece is, instead of presenting that to the classroom with a bunch of Minnesota teenagers that have zero interest or stake in sea turtle survival because we're 1,000 miles from any ocean, she decided to reach out to hotels around the world, specifically Costa Rica and Hawaii, to ask if she could display these brochures in their hotels. She didn't have to leave the classroom. She didn't have to live near any of these beaches, but she made a difference. Instead of creating a brochure, presenting it to the teacher, and throwing it in the trash, her brochure is actually being seen by real tourists at real hotels near real nesting beaches where her brochure is making a real difference. So you can see the difference. If you have a project versus a PBL, there's going to be a lot less intrinsic motivation to do the work. There's going to be a lot less interest. There's going to be no engagement because there's really not going to be purpose. And students can feel that when their work is shared with a real and relevant audience in a way that makes an impact, that matters. So finish the sentence in the chat. It's not PBL if. So do I need to have a lot of experience with student-led project-based learning in order to take it on without the shift or the challenges taking over my life? No, but having these puzzle pieces in place makes all the difference. And you might be thinking, well, you have, almost 2 decades worth of experience with project-based learning. It's easy for you to say. But here's the thing. It hasn't always been super seamless. At the beginning of my career, I didn't have any of these strategies in place, so it was chaotic and frustrating a lot of the time. But because I have that experience, I can be here today to help you get these puzzle pieces in place before you make all the same mistakes that I did. It doesn't have to be hard. Yes, there are these puzzle pieces that you should get into place now, and that does take some effort and it does take some thought, but it can also be really exciting and fun and inspiring, and in the long run, it saves you exhaustion, headaches, frustration with your students, and so on. So here are those 8 puzzle pieces. Again, routines and systems, scaffolding tools, feedback and reflection, solid PBL culture, skill building, normalizing mistakes and revisions, and student portfolios, and staying true to PBL. And a lot of this might feel like a lot, like, I got to put all of these things into place. However, they really all kind of flow together. So for example, having a solid PBL culture is really connected to normalizing mistakes and revisions. You can really put those 2 things together. Or student portfolios, that is a routine in a system. Scaffolding tools, having those scaffolding tools where students know they are and they have access to them constantly, those are also routines and systems. So is feedback and reflection. Feedback and reflection is also intertwined with solid PBL culture. So all of these things really kind of bleed into each other. So it's not as much work as it looks. And you don't have to do it all. With the right pieces in place, your students can take the lead and you can finally take a breath. Project-based learning works for you when it's set up with them in mind. You've got the puzzle pieces. Now it's time to put them into action. And I know you can do this. If you're curious about what these puzzle pieces actually look like in practice, I have the tools and the steps that I can show you to make this happen. So you have two choices. You can give it a shot on your own, which I know you can do. You are perfectly capable of taking these puzzle pieces and putting them together and giving PBL, project-based learning, in your classroom in a way that's self-directed, a really valiant shot. Or we can do it together with PBL Teacher Academy. This is your one-stop shop for student-led project-based learning. This is the academy. This is the place. This is the digital course where I teach you step by step by step by step exactly how to put all of these puzzle pieces into place and then some. Once you have those puzzle pieces in place, PBL Teacher Academy really shows you how to just put it on autopilot so that you're not burned out, so that your students care, so that they have autonomy, so that they're producing work and outcomes that matter, not just in the world, but that matter to them. In this comprehensive self-paced digital course, you will learn how to organize and facilitate student-led project-based learning in your school, classroom, or homeschool with simple strategies and clear systems that foster a culture of creativity and self-direction. So you'll map out a plan in PBL Teacher Academy for shifting to the facilitator mindset instead of director and teacher and really all the hats. You're the facilitator. Your students are the directors. You will map out a plan for training your students in PBL, which remember is one of those really important skills that students will need to learn. In relationship and community building, and a plan for seamless facilitation and implementation, a schedule, structure, and routine, and the use of guiding materials throughout the PBL process. Those guiding materials or scaffolding materials that I showed you, all of those, every guiding material that I have ever used with my students is included in PBL Teacher Academy for you to use and modify and edit how you wish. I'm not extra special. I'm not. I don't have access to exclusive experts or technology or resources, but I do have experience. I have done this for 17 years. I have failed and learned and decided to put these systems and routines and feedback and norms and skill building exercises. I've put all of that into place, and I have a roadmap for you to do the same so that student-led PBL can be a whole lot smoother. You can feel more sound of mind, and your students can be more independent and engaged and really take ownership of their learning. So PBL Teacher Academy includes 5 modules. Each module has lessons. So the first module is all about that PBL culture building and really how to build that solid PBL culture where your students walk into your room and think to themselves, maybe not even think because it's just, again, it's on autopilot. They just come in and they know what to do because they're in a PBL classroom, period. Module 2 is all about PBL design. And 3 is PBLs in action. So how students execute these PBLs and how you facilitate that execution. Outcomes and assessments, and then moving forward. What do you do with all of this information, with all of this training? What are the next steps as you move into your project-based learning journey? The guiding materials, like I said, are all there for you. So there's a culture building guide, a personal learning plan template for students to base their PBLs on their needs, on their interests, on their passions, on their strengths and challenges, and so on. There's a PBL design guide. So you can design the PBLs for students or they can design them themselves. There's PBL design workbooks for upper elementary and then middle and high school. And then PBL execution toolkit. So that includes things like task lists and check-ins and feedback forms. And then an assessment packet with rubrics and reflections and student-generated rubrics. And then a project-based learning portfolio template, which is the one that you saw. There are 5 training modules, those guiding materials, a certificate of completion for 6 hours, lifetime access. So if you enroll in PBL Teacher Academy, it is always yours. It's always there. So you can take it at your own pace. And then continued support from me. So just these things alone are a $300 value. Then there's also a bonus. So when I talked about support, number 5, continued support being a big thing for me, I wanted this program to feel attainable, and I wanted you to have support. And so one of the ways I've decided to do that is with this discussion feature. So the discussion button that you've been adding your chat responses to throughout this webinar, that is always going to be there. So there's that discussion button in every lesson of PBL Teacher Academy. So if you have a question as you're watching, ask that question and I will quickly respond to it. I also have a live chat. So on my website and in your members portal where you access PBL Teacher Academy, there's a button that you can click that I am on there more or less. If I'm not there to answer your live chat, I will email you back really shortly within the same day. Another bonus is a private community. So within the PBL Teacher Academy members area, there is a Facebook style group or a community where you can connect with other PBL teachers and parents, where you can ask questions, where you can share resources or ideas. And then there's a bonus design thinking module or lesson and a toolkit that goes along with it. I talked about in puzzle piece 6, normalizing mistakes and revisions. Design thinking was an example of a process where the phases of design thinking naturally incorporate mistake making, testing, revisions, and that cycle as many times as is needed. So if you were curious about design thinking, that is an awesome approach for developing these awesome final products in PBL experiences. Another bonus is just this small business attention. So I know I've told you that I have these support tools like live chat and the discussion feature and email anytime. And I can do that because it's just me. I'm not a huge company that doesn't have time for you. I'm just a parent. I'm a teacher that really wants to share project-based learning with other educators because I know how special and amazing it is. And I'm here to support you through this entire program. So with the core program, the 5 modules and the guiding materials, plus the live chat and discussion feature, the private community, the design thinking bonus module, and intimate group personal attention, the total value of this course is $447. So it's valued at $447, but you get it at $197. And because this is a promotion period, because it's Black Friday and Cyber Monday is coming up, this week only, you can enroll in PBL Teacher Academy for life for $158. So you have from now until December 1st to enroll in PBL Teacher Academy for this sale, this awesome Black Friday sale price. This is the only time of year I do this. Outside of this week, the price for PBL Teacher Academy is $197. So you can enroll now or go to experientiallearningdepot.com/PBL Teacher Academy to learn more about it, to really dive deeper into what exactly is included in all the modules, what you get, how to enroll, that kind of stuff. So this testimonial from Jade, I love it because I have taken courses that are so unorganized. They're not straightforward. I don't leave the course having something really tangible to work with. And Jade, who is an educator, said it is comprehensive, straightforward, clear, and well organized. And the comprehensive piece is really important to me also because I wanted to have something that you can enroll in that gives you everything that you need so that you don't have to hunt and peck around the internet to find a bunch of other resources or trainings, that it's all just right here for you at a really great price. And then Quinae, she's a homeschool parent and also a co-op director. She said this course is so well organized and structured. It has helped me make the ideas of PBL feel more concrete. The course has given me the specific structure to start exploring and implementing PBL. And I have been in touch with her since she enrolled several years ago, and we still chat now and again. And then I also wanted to just show you a couple success stories. This one was from Ryan from Minnesota, a teacher in Minnesota, works with high school students. These are just some of the PBLs that his students designed and executed. So for example, Ryan had multiple students create real functioning businesses. And Hanima, one of her high school students for physics, completed a PBL project where they developed a coaching video series to help athletes perform at a higher level. So both of these examples are students developing something that was real world and shared with real people and made a real impact. So let's talk about group enrollment. If you are thinking of enrolling as a group, so you and your colleagues or you and the staff at your school, I've done group enrollment for several schools, and what I've seen it do is create consistency. So they all have the same training and the same materials. There's built-in support system from me, increased motivation, skills standardization, and it's cost savings and lifetime access. So if this is something that you're interested in talking about group enrollment with me, if you go above a certain number of enrollees, the price drops a bit. So let's talk if this is something you're interested in. You can email me at sarah@experientiallearningdepot.com. Okay, so I said at the beginning that if you hang with me till the end, I would tell you about one more bonus, and that is this fast action bonus that you only get if you enroll by the end of this sale period. So by Cyber Monday, December 1st. So this is a Going Digital with Student-Led PBL bonus module. This is a really awesome opportunity because project-based learning final products are to be shared and they are authentic. And so whether you're a virtual teacher or an in-person teacher or a homeschool parent, it doesn't matter if you're a virtual teacher or not. Digital tools can make project-based learning far more impactful because the reach is greater. Students are able to create amazing things in these incredible digital software programs and then share it with anyone in the world. You know, the Sea Turtle brochure example. My student literally just sent a link of it to a variety of hotels around the world that are on nesting beaches, and a handful of them responded. Had it not been for access to these digital tools, my student would have never gotten her brochure into the hands of those who really need it, which is tourists. So I highly recommend enrolling soon so that you get this sale price and so that you get this bonus module on Going Digital, which I recently added an AI lesson to. So you might fear the chaos of failure, right? Or fear that your students won't be able to get it, or fear a learning curve for yourself, or the fear of doing it alone. And what I can say to you is that, yes, I understand these fears. They're valid, especially when we feel so exhausted already. But I am here to support you. This digital course is comprehensive, so there's no loose ends. And you have it forever. So don't let fear stop you from taking your life back and really reducing that burnout. Also, I have a 100% money back guarantee. If you do the work, show me your results within 7 days of enrolling and you're still not satisfied, I will gladly give you your money back. And I give this guarantee because I really put blood, sweat, and tears into creating this course, and I know that it's going to work for you. So how to get enrolled? If you're on board, this is something you want to do, I want you to go to experientiallearningdepot.com/PBL-teacher-academy, and this is the page that you're going to see. Click on Enroll Now, and that will bring you to this page. It won't say $197 if you do this between now and December 1st. It'll be $158. And then you put in your information. Once you enroll, you'll get an email with login information, and it'll bring you to this page, and you log in and you get started. And this is what it looks like inside. So there's all of the modules that I told you about, the design thinking bonus. There's an introduction to PBL Teacher Academy. I suggest starting with that. So remember your why. Are you curious? Are you motivated? Are you burnt out? Are you a variety of those? PBL Teacher Academy will, again, help you take your life back. Put the ownership on your students. And aside from all that, just be so much fun. I'm telling you, project-based learning has changed my life, and I will never go back to any other style of learning because it's impacted me such a great deal, and I've seen how it's changed the lives of my students. So if you're ready to get started, go to experientiallearningdepot.com/PBL-teacher-academy and get enrolled while you can get the Black Friday deal and the Going Digital with PBL bonus. Okay, let's answer some questions. I'm going to answer some really frequently asked questions that I get a lot about project-based learning in general and PBL Teacher Academy. If you have a question that comes up as I'm going through this, please put it in the discussion tab, and I will either respond immediately, but if I don't, I will get back to you as soon as humanly possible, probably through email. And I might even create a video for you. So please do put questions in the chat if you have them. All right, the first question I get often is, does project-based learning and does PBL Teacher Academy work for all age groups? The simple answer is yes. All age groups do project-based learning. My high school students did it, my middle school students do it, and my own young children at home have been doing it since they were preschoolers. The difference is in how it's scaffolded and the level of independence and what skills your students have. So kindergartners wouldn't be expected to go online and dig deep and do research and connect with community experts because they, one, are learning how to read. They don't do research on computers yet. They likely don't even have access to computers. So it would look a lot differently with kindergartners than it would with high schoolers who have a little bit more autonomy and freedom and the agency to go and design their own project-based learning experiences and execute them and talk to community experts and do a lot of the work outside of the boundaries of your classroom. So it's really all a difference of kind of where you are on this spectrum of guidance. How much of a role do you play in it? And I have a full lesson in PBL Teacher Academy for how to scaffold project-based learning based on age and skill level. Another question I'm often asked is, I'm bound by the standards. How do I do PBL and still meet those requirements? First, in PBL Teacher Academy, I have another full lesson on how to design project-based learning experiences around the standards or around a subject or around targets, etc. So my background is teaching in life science. And so a lot of my PBLs, especially my group or my class PBLs, revolve around the next generation science standards. When my own students, if I'm having my own high school students design and lead their own PBLs, they are also asked to do it around those standards. And in PBL Teacher Academy, I show you exactly how to do that. One of the cool things about project-based learning is that you can cover a lot of skills, a lot of standards, a lot of subjects, a lot of requirements, a lot of competencies in one single PBL. So, if you're thinking, I need to cover this one standard, but PBLs are sustained and they take quite a while, I'm never going to get these standards knocked out. The reality of it is that one PBL can knock out literally a long list of standards. And again, I show you in PBL Teacher Academy how to do that. Can I do this digitally? I live in a small town and don't have a lot of experts to reach out to. The simple answer is yes, you can do it digitally, and you should, in my opinion. The reason I say that is because the digital world that we live in is so valuable in so many ways. We realistically have AI in our lives. We have YouTube in our lives. We have the internet. It's there. And we can be afraid of it, or we can use it responsibly and teach our students how to use it productively and with purpose. And so project-based learning is unique in that it has purpose, that students are making an impact. Students are using their final products and their new knowledge as a solution to a problem that is authentic, that should reach a very relevant audience rather than just the classroom. And digital tools make all of that so much easier. It makes reach so much wider, and it makes that impact so much greater. So I highly recommend incorporating some digital elements into your project-based learning experience with high school students and with your young students, with preschoolers. Of course, you would take more ownership of computer use with these younger students. However, it's still really important. For example, my own toddlers, I had a toddler and a preschooler at the time, that they got heavily involved in a citizen science project where they were going out into the world and taking photos of bee pollinators and then bringing them back to this data, the citizen science data collection site, and putting their information on there and checking out what the different kinds of pollinators are and how their work is protecting these pollinators. It was very real world, but the citizen science piece of it wouldn't have happened without this digital program. So my point is that, the virtual world can be really scary. It can also be really impactful in project-based learning. You already know this, but if you enroll in PBL Teacher Academy today, you get a full module on how to use digital tools in project-based learning, whether you're a virtual teacher or an in-person teacher or a homeschool parent. It includes a new lesson on AI. So I highly recommend trying to grab that. All right. I know my students will struggle with this. They're just not independent enough. There's this question is asked in a variety of ways. Basically, the question is, I don't feel like my students can do this, either because they're not independent enough, they don't have the skills. I have, one student who is on this end of the skill spectrum and another student on this far end. There's too many differences. My answer to that is project-based learning is the perfect approach when you have just a diversity of skills in your classroom or with your students, because there's so much of their personal experiences, challenges, needs, all of that is worked into it. So it's a project-based learning, especially the way that I approach it in PBL Teacher Academy, is very self-directed. It's very personalized. So each of your students, you may feel like, they just don't have the independence yet. They will get there, and I show you how to do that in PBL Teacher Academy. So have some faith. I know that your students can do it. I worked with high-risk students for 11 years in the city, and they were all over the map as far as skill level went, and it ends up working out because it's a personalized approach. All right. Would I get CEUs with PBL Teacher Academy? Yes, you would get 6 clock hours, whether you're I use CEUs to reapply to my teaching license in Minnesota every 5 years. The Minnesota Department of Ed would take these CEUs and allow me to use them towards renewing my license. I can't promise that yours will do the same. However, you do get a certificate at the end of PBL Teacher Academy once you finished it that says that you have completed 6 clock hours of project-based learning professional development. All right. I am a religion teacher. I'm having trouble seeing how this fits into my subject or area of expertise. So this could be, fill in the blank. This particular question was about religion, but I'm an English teacher. I'm an ELA teacher. I'm a literature teacher. I'm a science teacher, math, art, Phi-Ed. Can I do project-based learning? The answer is absolutely yes, because it is a framework, not necessarily a subject. It's not, I was going to use art as an example. Scratch that. Bottom line is that it's a framework. It doesn't matter if it's art, doesn't matter if it's religion, doesn't matter if it's world history, as long as The experience has a driving question, community experts are used, there's an innovative final product, an authentic presentation is there, it's sustained inquiry, and it's not just a project about religion, right? There are these special components to project-based learning. So as long as those components are there, it doesn't matter what subject you teach. All right. How do I encourage parents to get on board? This is also a very common question, but sometimes it's not parents. Sometimes the question is, how do I get my principal on board? How do I get my other colleagues on board? How do I get my students on board? And a big way to do that is to, in my opinion, show examples of what this looks like. They might just really not understand. And then to show them the benefits. What is the benefit of project-based learning? And if those benefits are something that your colleagues, parents, students, principal, if they value those benefits, like skill building, like developing the wherewithal to manage big projects that are very real world, like we all are going to go into this adult world and have to manage life's projects. That is life. This is preparing students to do that successfully when they're no longer in your classroom holding your hand, or when they're no longer living at home. So I think that giving real examples and talking about the benefits with these people that are sort of reluctant. And in this webinar where you're watching this training right now, there is a guide called Bonus. I can't even remember what the guide is called, but essentially it is turning reluctant teachers, principals, parents, students into major supporters of project-based learning. So it just gives you a guide. It gives you some of those benefits. It gives you examples to share with whoever is resistant to this big change. I'm in this webinar because I'm exhausted. Doing more PD, I just don't know if I have time for it. Yes, so you might hear me say you get 6 clock hours of PBL Teacher Academy CEUs. That means there's 6 hours of video. Here's what I'm going to say to that. 1, you have this forever. So you can take your time with it. You can go in and do half hour a day. You can get all of it done over this break that we're in right now. You can slowly kind of tick away at it over the rest of the year and then have it ready to implement next school year. So you always have this. You have PBL Teacher Academy for a lifetime if you've enrolled. You also have me as a support system. So we've talked about this. There's the discussion. I have a live chat feature. You can email me anytime. I am a one-person show, so this isn't like a big company that you need to fight for my attention. I'm here, and I love to talk about project-based learning. So if you have questions, if you're struggling to get through a certain module because you're not sure how it applies to your own students, please reach out to me, and I will absolutely help walk you through this. I think one of the best parts about PBL Teacher Academy is the support that you get as you go. So yes, this might take some time. Yes, it might feel overwhelming and daunting, but I'm here for you, and you have it for a lifetime, so you can take all the time that you need, really. So those are the most frequently asked questions. If you have a question that I have not answered, again, please put it in the discussion, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I've really enjoyed speaking on this specific topic of teacher burnout because I've been there. And project-based learning has really kind of saved my sanity as a teacher. So I hope that this was valuable and that you can take some of this, whether you enroll in PBL Teacher Academy or not, that this webinar was helpful and that you can take something with you and put something into action that I spoke about today. Okay, so we'll talk to you soon. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks.